The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Academic Consortium had never witnessed such silence. Across the vast, crystalline amphitheater, representatives from 47 different species sat in stunned contemplation, their various appendages, tentacles, and neural interfaces all focused on the holographic equation that dominated the central display. The Zephyrian calculus had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds for over 3 centuries. Originally discovered in the ruins of an ancient civilization, the mathematical formula was believed to hold the key to faster-than-light communication without the traditional quantum entanglement limitations. If solved, it would revolutionize interstellar society, allowing instant communication across galactic distances. Dr. Vexhai, the Assembly's most celebrated Altarian mathematician, lowered his 6-eyed head in defeat. His species had evolved specifically for mathematical reasoning, their brain structures optimized over millions of years for processing complex numerical relationships. Yet after 2 standard months of continuous calculation, he had made no progress. The equation appears to exist in a state of mathematical impossibility, announced Prime Scholar Kethara through her translation matrix. The Nexari were living computers, their crystalline bodies capable of processing quintillions of calculations per second. Our quantum processors have explored 10,047 possible solution paths. None yield a coherent result. Murmurs rippled through the assembly in dozens of languages and communication methods. The ethereal collective shared their failure through synchronized bioluminescent pulses. The Silicon Brotherhood's representatives sparked with frustrated electrical discharges. Even the ancient Vardani, whose civilization had mastered mathematics before most species had developed sentience, admitted defeat through their elderly spokesperson. At the back of the amphitheater, in the section reserved for developing species, Dr. Sarah Chen tried to make herself invisible. Humans had only been admitted to the consortium 5 years ago, and their inclusion was still controversial among many member species. Earth's technology was primitive compared to the galactic standard, and human mathematical capabilities were considered adequate at best. Sarah hadn't even wanted to attend this gathering. As a professor of theoretical physics from MIT, she'd been selected almost as an afterthought to fill Earth's observer quota. The translation device in her ear had been working overtime, converting the Assembly's discussions into terms her limited human brain could comprehend. But as she listened to each species elaborate on their failed attempts, something nagged at her. The equation, while complex, reminded her of something from her graduate studies. She pulled out an old-fashioned paper notebook, a quaint human habit that had drawn amused looks from other attendees, and began sketching. The Zephyrian calculus sprawled across the holographic display in all its intimidating glory. X, Y, Z, T, XFE2R, XOLMN, DLD, RAR, N1 to 1, NVERN, DN, N2, plus, Nundinu, where each Greek symbol represented multi-dimensional functions that the galaxy's supercomputers had been unable to resolve. Sarah stared at her notebook, her pen hovering over the paper. The equation structure was hauntingly familiar. It looked like a twisted version of something she'd seen before, something much simpler. Her mind raced back to her undergraduate days, to a problem set in Professor Morrison's class on electromagnetic field theory. Without fully understanding why, she began writing. Not the complex, multi-dimensional nightmare on the display, but something far more basic. Her pen moved across the paper in quick, confident strokes. The breakthrough came suddenly, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't realized was there. The Zephyrian calculus wasn't unsolvable because it was too complex. It was unsolvable because everyone was overcomplicating it. The ancient civilization that created it had embedded a conceptual trap, a mathematical red herring that assumed any species advanced enough to find it would approach it with the most sophisticated tools available. But humans, in their relative technological infancy, weren't burdened by such assumptions. Sarah's pen moved faster now, scribbling notations that would have seemed absurdly simple to any of the galactic geniuses around her. She reduced the multidimensional integrals to a series of basic calculus operations. She recognized that the infinite series was actually a Fourier transform in disguise. Most importantly, she realized that the equation was asking the wrong question entirely. "Excuse me," she said, standing up. Her voice, amplified by the translation system, echoed through the suddenly quiet amphitheater. Thousands of alien eyes, sensors, and consciousness projections turned toward her. Dr. Vexhai's expression, as much as his insectoid features could convey, suggested he found her interruption presumptuous. "Dr. Chen of Earth," Prime Scholar Kethara acknowledged with what sounded like barely concealed condescension. "Do you have a question about the proceedings?" "Actually," Sarah said, walking down toward the central display, "I think I have the answer." The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Several species began what she assumed were their equivalent of nervous laughter. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Vexhai said carefully, "my species has spent 3 months analyzing this equation with computational power that exceeds your planet's total technological capacity. Perhaps you misunderstood." "The answer is 42, Sarah interrupted, holding up her notebook. The laughter stopped abruptly. "I'm sorry, what?" Prime Scholar Kethara's crystalline form flickered with confusion. Sarah approached the holographic display and gestured to her notebook. "When you strip away all the dimensional complexity and recognize the pattern buried underneath, the Zephyrian calculus reduces to a simple harmonic oscillator equation. The ancients who created this weren't trying to solve faster-than-light communication, they were creating a test. The real message isn't in the solution path, it's in recognizing that sometimes the most profound answers are also the simplest ones." She pointed to her scribbled work. "The coefficient that makes the entire equation balance, the key that unlocks FTL communication, is 42. Not 42 Pombarazo 1, not a complex number with 42 as its real component. Just 42. Dr. Vexhai's 6 eyes blinked in sequence as his neural implants verified her work. Prime Scholar Kethara's form began pulsing with rapid calculations. Around the amphitheater, the galaxy's greatest minds frantically checked Sarah's ridiculously simple solution. One by one, they began to confirm what the human had scribbled in her primitive notebook in less than 3 minutes. The equation that had stumped galactic civilization for 3 centuries had been solved by a species that had barely learned to leave their own solar system, using nothing more than pencil, paper, and the kind of intuitive thinking that came from not knowing enough to assume it was impossible. As the reality sank in, Dr. Vexhai approached Sarah with something resembling respect. "Dr. Chen," he said, "perhaps we have underestimated human cognitive capabilities." Sarah smiled, closing her notebook. "Maybe you were just overthinking it." The galaxy's first instantaneous communication array went online 6 months later, built around the deceptively simple principles that a human had recognized in seconds. Earth's status in the galactic consortium was immediately elevated, and humanity found itself at the center of a communications revolution that would reshape interstellar civilization. And in the archives of the Grand Assembly, alongside the most complex mathematical proofs in galactic history, a single page from a human's paper notebook was preserved as one of the most elegant solutions ever recorded. Sometimes, the universe's greatest puzzles were waiting for someone naive enough to assume they should be simple.